Hi, welcome and thank you for coming. I set up all of these chairs.
Do you want us to sit
so
there,
you can
Jess?
see? So, can you see from there, or do you want to?
I guess she said them up.
Oh, good, because I thought this would be a good, but will they be able to see that?
Yeah, because they have it. Not to make everybody move, but I just time. So you don't have like a print next to you. Do you want to flip the thing? Oh, sure, for that, and then I'll.
I like that.
So thank you for coming. I want to especially thank the planning board members who came tonight, knowing that they are going to be having to endorse this plan. So I appreciate you taking the time out of a non-planning board meeting. And other members of the public who are just here for interest, thank you very much. And our Housing Partnership, and Joanne, thank you. So, you know who I am. I'm Jessica. We are here tonight to look at the findings of our most recent housing production plan and look at the draft strategies. This plan is in the draft format right now. It's probably 95% done, I would say, at this point. But we're here looking for public feedback and comment on the plan at this point. And so we just want to present the findings. This is an update from the last time we looked at housing, which was in 2008 with the master plan. So we have new numbers, new census, new information. So this is how we're going to break it up for tonight. I'm going to briefly talk about purpose. Then I'm going to turn it over to Jane Armington, who is our consultant from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, who has done the majority of the work on this plan, gathering the data and writing it for us. She's going to go over introduction, key findings. And then Jana, who is our fearless leader on the Housing Partnership, is going to give the overview on the plan recommendations. And then we'll just open it up for comment and dialogue and discussion afterwards. So I'm hoping that we can get through this for like an hour. That's my hope. So if you want to just go to the next slide. So purpose. So the purpose of this plan is in sort of the big picture, the big umbrella, is to identify our housing needs in the city. Like I said, we have new census data now, we have new information, so it's time looking at the snapshot of where we are now. And then based on sort of identifying these needs, coming up with the strategies for meeting these needs. And this goal is language that specifically was the mission statement, I believe, for the housing chapter of the master plan. If I'm remembering correctly, that language comes directly from that. So we're still working under the same goal as we determined in 2008. What is a housing production plan? So this is a very specific type of housing plan. It's authorized under Chapter 40B, and it's administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. And there are things that this plan must do based on the state statute. We have to look at the local and regional housing needs. We have to identify opportunities and constraints to meeting needs. And we have to provide recommendations to meeting housing needs. Now, why would we go through all of this just to, I think it's great to plan. I'm a planner. I love data. I love information. But what are sort of the state regulatory benefits of doing this? If we as a city were to meet our set goal of producing 0.05% of units for affordable housing compared to our housing stock.
0.5%.
0.5%, not 0.05, 0.5%. We could potentially get some relief if a 40B project came under a comp permit. So we would have to be producing 38 units in a year in order to get that relief. So that's sort of the big carrot that the state waves at you, like this is why you want to do this. There's also the preference, and this is what I care about, certain state grant funds. So that's another key reason to go through this planning process. Above and beyond, it's just a good thing to do to take a snapshot of where we are in terms of housing and coming up with strategies on how we're going to create more affordable housing. So since 2006, we had done the housing production plan in 2006. It really helped feed the housing chapter for the master plan in 2008. There wasn't any new data, but a lot of that information was brought into the 2008 master plan. We've had a housing partnership when was the partnership actually created? There was a housing committee that then became a partnership.
It was between 2006 and 2008.
Okay, so that happened. Okay. We've also adopted the Chapter 40R Smart Growth Zoning Overlay District. That was in 2010. And because of adopting that zoning overlay district, we have the King Cottage Street, which was permitted under that zoning. So that's exciting. And we have almost 100 new affordable housing units that have been permitted. We've got the 50 units at Carter Street, we have the 38 units at Parsons Village, and then we've got 6 units at the 2 Habitat for Humanity developments. So we've been really proactive as a community, I think, in comparison to some of our neighboring communities in promoting affordable housing and having units rebuilt. And a lot of that is the partnership between the public side and the private development side. Is that it?
Yeah.
Take it away,
So,
Jane. You're going to stand back
I'm
here?
going to stand back here, but I'll stand up in front for a second just so people can see who I am. So, hello, I'm Jane Armington. I'm from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I'm their housing planner there in the land use department. I've been at PVPC for, I think this is starting my 7th year. And I've helped a number of communities in the region write housing plans. East Hampton's one of, I think, 6 or maybe even 8 now. And then I also authored the regional housing plan, which some of you probably have read at this point. So, so if there's things in the presentation that I don't cover, I have, I can answer questions at the end. Especially, I didn't necessarily focus on regional housing issues because it's about East Hampton, but if there's things you want to know as comparing East Hampton to the region, I can talk about that later. I'm going to stand in the back because I am presenting on a lot of data that I need to look at some of my notes for, so I apologize for that. It was actually maybe better if they sat over here because then they could kind of...
Yeah, well.
And I don't always sound like this, I have a slight cold. So one of the first things I wanted to do is, before we get into the findings of the plan, I think it's important to establish what we mean by housing that is affordable versus affordable housing. And I'm also going to highlight other commonly used housing terminology. So the generally accepted definition of housing that is affordable is housing that is affordable if the household the household is paying no more than 30% of their gross annual income on housing. So that includes utilities. And households that pay more than 30% are considered to be cost burdened, and they may have difficulty affording necessities such as food, clothing, transportation, medical care, education. Also, furthering one's education is thrown into that as well. The difference between that and I think it's like the lowercase a affordable versus the big case a affordable is what we talk about a lot in this plan is affordable housing that is restricted to households that are lower income households. So this plan is about housing that is affordable, and it's about market rate housing, but it also talks about affordable housing. So we hit both categories. So the state of Massachusetts considers affordable housing, in the big capital A sense, to be housing that gets listed under subsidized housing inventory, which that is housing that is deed restricted. It has to hit 3 criteria. Housing that is deed restricted for households that earn up to 80% of the area median income, which I'll explain what that is in a second. It has to be rented or sold to households that earn up to 80% of the area median income. And then it has to be sold or rented according to state-approved affirmative fair marketing standards. Mass General Law Chapter 40B, which was established in 1969, encourages communities to work to ensure that at least 10% of their total housing in the community qualifies as affordable to households at or below 80% of this area median income. And for communities that have not reached 10%, developers with projects involving the creation of affordable housing can override local regulations by receiving a comprehensive permit from the local zoning board of appeals. So as Jessica pointed out, one of the benefits of doing a housing production plan is that there is potentially some relief from Chapter 40B if the community were to be able to prove that there was 38 affordable housing units created in one calendar year. And the state put together this type of program. It was under a different name in the 2000s. It may have even been before that. As a way to recognize that it's really hard to jump from, as you see in the last bullet, creating 303 units all at once. So it was to recognize that communities are creating affordable housing by incremental progress, and to give them some benefit with that under 40B. So what is area median income? It is the median family income for the metropolitan statistical area. And East Hampton is part of the Springfield metropolitan statistical area, which includes all 43 towns in Hampden and Hampshire County. So the area median income for East Hampton is the same as it is in Long Meadow, it's the same as it is in Springfield, and the same as it is in Amherst. So it's all 43 towns are part of the same metropolitan statistical area. They all have the same median family income for the purposes of affordable housing qualification. And the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, calculates this AMI annually based on U.S. Census Bureau data. And just to give you some context, the 2014 area median income was $65,700. And so then from the area median income, HUD calculates these benchmarks starting at low income, which is no more than 80% of the AMI, which we've already referenced that term earlier today, or this evening. Very low income, which is no more than 50% of the AMI, and extremely low income. And then they also take that number and establish income limits based on family size. And if it sounds complicated, it's because it is. It's a formula that HUD uses. Like I said, it's based on census data. It is easily accessible. It's updated every year. Anyone can go find it online. You can try to maybe do the math yourself. It doesn't probably work out for you because it doesn't work out for me half the time. But in any case, the little stick figures down there just represent that a one-person household at 80% of the area median income for 2014 made, or their maximum was $44,750, and then the four-person household at 80% of the area median income was $63,900. Okay, so that's some. I meant to have a slide that said this is other confusing affordable housing terminology, but these are some of the most commonly used lingo that you would hear. So let's get into key findings. So we're going to review important demographic and housing characteristics and trends that impact housing affordability, choice, and access to housing. So the first is we looked at growth trends in the city. So in the first couple of slides, this one included, that I'm going to go over, show that the city continues to have a variety of household types in terms of size, household size, age of the population, income and ability, which results in the need for a variety of housing options in the city. So East Hampton, like most communities in the Pioneer Valley, saw the number of households, which is the red line, increase at a faster rate than its population from 1990 to 2010, which reflects the trend of more people living in smaller households. So 17% increase for households versus 3% increase for residents. And this is because the number of people living in a housing unit over the last 2 decades has been declining as more people choose to live alone, have no children, or have fewer children. You can see this here in another way. So the blue is the households with children. So in 1990, you had a lot more. In 2010, you had a lot less. And while you saw the number of single-person households in the city increase. The city has an aging population. Over the last 20 years, the East Hampton had a proportional, so of all the residents in town, the number of the percentage of the population below the age of 45 increased, while the population, below the age of 45 decreased, while the population above the age of 45 increased, which is it's a reflection of certainly an aging population. It also reflects more people in the older category having fewer children or no children and shifting location preferences. And then projections done by the UMass Donahue Institute, which did population projections for all communities in the state of Massachusetts, show that there's a continued trend towards East Hampton having an aging population. And it's not just East Hampton, it's most communities in the Pioneer Valley as well. And this slide shows how this plays out with your median age in the city. It's also just important to note that housing for families is still needed in this town. Just because you do have an aging population, production needs to be balanced in the future going forward with families and smaller households, though. This plan also highlights the need for accommodating or encouraging housing units for residents with disabilities. There's an estimated 11% of the city's population of residents aged 18 to 64 reported having one or more disabilities on the census, and then an estimated 40% of elderly residents, so over the age of 65, reported having one or more disability. And we know that there's a demand for affordable and barrier-free housing, and that the current supply in the city and in the region does not fulfill this demand. This is a regional problem, and hopefully communities like East Hampton will be making efforts to increase supply. So the median household income of East Hampton, which was measured from 2012, was close to $56,000. And this was lower than Hampshire counties, but higher than Hampden counties. And I think what I wanted to show about this slide is, while this data may show that East Hampton is sort of middle of the road, and many know East Hampton historically to be a community comprised of working class residents, data now is also showing that, data by household income level is showing that over the last 2 decades, the city has more households with higher incomes. That percentage of the population of households is increasing. So the households making over $100,000 a year have increased substantially over the last 20 years. And this may be a result of higher number of households with 2 incomes rather than 1 income households. And it may be the result of the overflow of wealthier households being priced out of Northampton. The good thing about this trend is that it's good to have a variety of households with different income levels in your community, because it creates stability. What the not so good, I wouldn't say it's bad, so I wanted to characterize this as the not so good part, is that it potentially could be pricing out households that have lesser income, or lesser than the wealthier households. So it might be creating affordable housing pressures in the future. And I think it's already starting to do that now. Everyone always wants to know who in my community would qualify for affordable housing. So this slide is data from HUD, and it's based off of American Community Survey data, so U.S. Census Bureau data, and it's showing that an estimated 45% of East Hampton families, so we're using the word families, not households, earned less than 80% of the area median income. So in one way or the other, they may qualify for affordable housing. The other thing I wanted to point out with this slide is that the incomes of residents in the downtown area and the adjacent neighborhoods, the plan shows those are the areas that do have lower incomes than the rest of the city as a whole.
Sorry, can I talk about that last slide?
Yeah.
You said 80% are. Did you say that? Could you say it again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't understand this slide. Okay. This is the slide that I thought would have some questions. So I'm saying that 45% of households make less than 85% of the area median income, or 45% of families in the city of East Hampton have less than 80%.
You add up columns
16, 12, and the 17.
17
Oh, okay.
and 10.
That's what you're doing.
That
Yeah.
gives you the,
Oh.
okay.
Wait, what are you doing?
No,
Add
16,
16,
12.
12, and 17, the first 2 lines. Add those together, they come up to 45.
16, 12, and 17
It's 45.
is 45%.
So they're less than
make
80%.
less than 80%
Yeah.
of the AMI. And the AMI is was referencing the earlier slides for the entire Springfield metropolitan area, but that's the number that is always used for whether or not a household would qualify for affordable housing. Okay. So this is just, I wouldn't say it's a quick slide, here's a slide on your housing characteristics. So and this is 2010 census data supplemented with some American Community Survey data from 2012. So in 2010 you had 7,615 housing units. Of those housing units, 95% were occupied and 5% were vacant. And we looked at vacancy specifically because of the lingering foreclosure crisis and whether or not that meant, and whether or not there was signs of East Hampton having a weak housing market, and it didn't appear that either of those were true for the city with a vacancy rate of 5%. And then in terms of your mix of owner-occupied versus renter-occupied, the reason why renter-occupied is highlighted is because this plan, along with other data that shows the types of housing units in their city, it shows that East Hampton really does have a great variety of housing options in your city, many of which are affordable right now to households of varying economic means. Not, of course, the households with the lowest economic means, but there are options, and especially different types of housing. So, and I think this is somewhat highlighted by the fact that 55% of your houses in homes in the city are single-family homes. So that means there's 45% of your homes are located in buildings that are either duplexes or multifamily structures. They may be owner-occupied structures. They may be renter-occupied, units. So you have a really great variety in the city. And later on, I'll highlight again. I think the challenge is going to be maintaining variety, continuing to have variety in the city, along with increasing affordable housing pressures. And then the last line in there is to highlight. We often look at the age of housing stock because age indicates potential rehabilitation needs, energy inefficiencies, lead paint issues, which is I can talk a lot about lead paint, but in any case, it's something, it's bad, and it's something that you need to look out for. And it also affects housing units that might be suitable for people with disabilities. So in any case, 30% of your housing units were built before 1940, which is comparable to a lot of communities in this region, specifically, or in particularly for a community that's like East Hampton, an older industrial mill, a city with older mill roots. With that percentage, I think the city is competitive for grant funds, though, at this time to help with doing housing rehab work in the future. So I just did a housing plan for a really small rural town, Pelham, and they actually, even though you think of Pelham as being a really old historic town, they are certainly, but their numbers were much lower, and so we had to unfortunately tell them that they're not going to be that competitive. So anyway. So we took a look at the housing market, and this slide shows varying income levels that are needed to purchase a home in the city. And so I'm going to draw your attention to example 2. So the $56,000 was the median household income, and coincidentally, which never really happens, but $231,000 was actually the median home value based on U.S. Census data. So median, but so what that's saying is that households just below and then above the median household income can afford to. They have a lot of housing options in the city. Households that make far below the median household income wouldn't have a lot of options to buy in the city. And again, I think the city is going to continue to see affordable housing pressures as it moves forward. I think people in this room know that East Hampton's a desirable place to live. That's why you all live here right now, with dynamic downtown, vibrant neighborhoods, and growing arts scene, and abundant natural resources. And other people like these things too, and you may start to see more affordable housing pressures because of that. Excuse me. This is just a slide to show how much income you would need to afford to rent a home. This would be applicable for any community, such as Southampton or Northampton, and then I took a look at what your rents were, recent asking rents. So, I'm sorry, but I mean, it is annoying. One thing that I'll say about the slide is, so for example, for household 1, this is U.S. Census data. I can't tell you if that's a 4-person household or a 1-person household, but in any case, they can afford $750, and if they were a 4-person household, then a 2-bedroom unit may not be that suitable for them, and they may not be able to afford a lot in the city. I guess that's sort of the connections you have to make.
Do those numbers include utilities?
No.
The ones on top of them.
The ones on top theoretically should include utilities, because it's how much you should be spending based on 30% of your income, so the ones on the bar chart. But the actual rents that are listed below do not include utilities. So
The ones below do not.
do not.
But the ones above do.
Yeah, the ones, and that's, I'm glad you asked. So the ones above are showing that if you're a household of one, for example, and if you're spending, you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing costs. That would bring you up to $750. So that would be including heat and electricity
I see.
and other utilities associated, maybe water. Yeah, thanks for asking. So the takeaways from the plan, you can tell me if you have different ones. The East Hampton currently offers an array of rental housing and homeownership options, many of which are affordable to households of varying economic means. But however, housing affordability will continue to be challenged by pressures placed on the local housing market from households seeking to live in a city with a dynamic downtown, vibrant neighborhoods, a growing art scene, and abundant natural resources. Over the last 20 years, you've certainly seen the number of higher income households and housing values increase. And I think to maintain that affordability, the city will need both market rate and affordable housing in the form of home ownership and rental units, as well as special needs housing. And in regards to affordable housing, the city is in need of low-income housing, so housing below 80% of the area median income. We're also in need of the other two categories: very low-income housing, housing priced at 50% of the AMI, and also extremely low-income housing, housing below 30% of the AMI. So these are, I think, the main challenges to creating more housing choice in East Hampton. And the first is there's a lack of awareness of a need for more housing choices. And what I mean by this is there's a lack of public awareness. So people outside of probably this room right now, that people just don't know that there's a need. So that's something that, as Jana will point out, the East Hampton Housing Partnership wants to do a better job communicating. There's limited land left to develop for new housing. The redevelopment of existing buildings or areas, such as in the mill area, may face parking constraints. And there is limited public and private financing opportunities for small, large-scale projects. And I'll say that the public financing that is available is often extremely competitive, and it takes very sophisticated people to piece financing together to make projects happen. And one of the things that was really clear throughout doing this project is that there's a lack of technical resources and clear procedures for undertaking small affordable housing projects. And I don't mean the city lacks these resources, which, you know, they kind of do, but I think we were more talking about there's no regional help right now, and there's, you know, it's unclear how much technical resources are available through DHCD in a clear way for communities. I know there's certainly staff there, but that's something I think not only East Hampton but other communities have approached at least the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to think about and work on. And that gets to the fact that there's limited land left to develop in the city, and that redevelopment of existing areas often requires smaller infill projects. So again, looking at small projects is something that has been challenging for the city to undertake. And then with that, I'm going to ask Jana, to come up and talk about some of the key plan recommendations.
I'll try to,
Can you tell me your last name, please?
sure, it's Tetro,
T-E-T.
R-E-A-U-L-D. Yep. Hi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the plan recommendations. In the plan, there's 45 different recommendations that we've come up with. I'm not going to go through all of them. Each recommended action has identified who is the entity that's going to move the action forward. A lot of times it's the housing partnership. And they are designed to be achievable. So when we looked at all the recommendations that we had come up with, we really kind of honed in to make sure that these were things that we could actually do and that we actually wanted to do. So we think that these are things that are achievable. And they're also meant for us to change and refine and elaborate on later on. Okay, I don't think I need like the cheat sheet anymore. So the objectives, there's 8 different kind of areas. that our priorities relate to creating more housing, producing more accessible housing, enabling more housing choice through regulatory action, which is things like changes to our zoning bylaws, preservation of affordable housing for units that are called like expiring use, so units that have deed restrictions that may expire in the future, and how does the city work with the owners of those units to make sure that they are preserved. Facilitate and maintain access to housing, increase public awareness, understanding fair housing, and strengthening our local capacity to create more affordable housing. So, work with the mayor and the city council to donate identified city-owned land. So we've done this already a little bit in East Hampton with the East Street parcel that was sent out with a request for proposals for habitat. Same thing with the Everett Street parcel that had the old gas station on it. That was a city-owned parcel that ended up being donated to affordable housing. Hold a developers workshop to encourage the redevelopment. The city of Northampton actually did this to kind of bring developers together, talk about what we have, what we, developers could do in the city, kind of bring awareness to that. This is a little bit what Jane was just talking about, working to develop procedures that would help smaller developers with infill projects in the city. What we see is that we don't have a lot of big parcels of land left in East Hampton. So, but sometimes for a little project of 4 units, a small developer in the city is afraid of affordable housing. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of documents, there's a lot of things to sign, and we'd like to try to figure out a way to kind of have some assistance, to say to the developer, well, we can help you, or we're going to hire a consultant, or we're going to get CPA money to hire a consultant to help you, so that you can build this little 4-unit project. Don't have a heart attack. A lot of the recommendations involve money, like from CPA and things like that. But so that's something we want to work on. Work with developers who want to do 40B developments in the city that we think are appropriate, that we're excited about, that are great. 40B is a great planning tool that we can use. Explore methods for increasing parking capacity. This is something that Jessica has brought up, that if there was more increasing parking capacity so that some of the mill buildings could be at more full capacity. Advocate on the local and federal level for more funds so that we can create more accessible units and both income restricted and market rate units. Revise the accessory dwelling unit ordinance to allow it by right in the R5 and R40 zoning districts. These are sometimes a little technical, I apologize. So accessory dwelling units are accessory apartments where an owner can build a kind of, they used to call it in-law apartments, for a 1-bedroom unit on their property. Some communities have been really successful with the in-law, with accessory units in terms of getting them counted on their subsidized housing inventory if they go through all of the DHCD fair marketing plan and things like that. So there's ideas around that.
And can I just sort of add to that one, just to even get market rate accessible accessory units, our ordinance is very strict. The units have to be, or end up being very small because it's based on a percentage of the current house. And so they would meet the building code, but they would be very small areas, and so when we have people come into the office and ask about building accessory units, once they take a look at the different requirements that are required, they back off from it. So we have interest, but the zoning is too restrictive to get those units to be built. And even if it's not an affordable unit or deed restricted, it's definitely a type of housing that is needed and can be used by a lot of folks in the city as rental property. So I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you. That's a good reminder that this is not only about affordable housing, which is sometimes what my whole world is about, but also about increasing more market rate housing. So this is what I talked about, expiring use, maintaining an awareness of what we have in the city that might expire in the future so that the city can be proactive in discussing with the owner what their plans might be to maintain those units as affordable. This, for those of you who have seen it in the paper, Rolling Green and Amherst, this is an example of something that's expiring, and everybody's going crazy trying to figure out how to save it. So this is kind of the same thing. Encourage long-term use restrictions in perpetuity, which meet the guidelines of DHCD. The city does this most of the time anyway. The CPA committee really likes things that meet the DHCD requirements for perpetuity, but just kind of continuing to do that. Assist the Housing Authority and other nonprofits with maintaining and improving their units with available grant programs that are available to the city. Advocate for, this was my recommendation, I think. So I work at the Amherst Housing Authority in the Section 8 program, and East Hampton Housing Authority doesn't have a Section 8 program. And so I think it's really important for other housing authorities in the region to make it a priority to give preferences to those residents who live in communities that don't have housing authorities with Section 8. So if you live in East Hampton, you may never get a voucher from the Amherst Housing Authority because you don't live in Amherst. I don't know if you'll get one from Northampton. I don't know if you'll get one from Holyoke. So I think it's important that we talk about regionalization of preferences so that people who live in communities don't get left out because their housing authority doesn't have a program. That's kind of my own issue. Rental support programs. So the Housing Partnership has talked about this a lot, helping people with first, last, and security. These are often barriers for folks that want to move to a new apartment. And there are some programs out there that already do this, so we've talked about kind of using city resources to help supplement those programs to make sure that people in East Hampton and other communities are being able to have access to that assistance. This is what the great work of the planning office already does, but take advantage of all the grant rounds for CDBG and other programs that help with housing rehab. Expand membership of the Housing Partnership for anybody in the room that really wants to work on affordable housing issues. We have, I think, 3 vacant seats. And we're pretty fun, and so, it's...
You guys are pretty fun.
We have snacks.
We sometimes have snacks. Jackie's a really good baker. Maintain membership on the Regional Housing Committee. So this is through PVPC and part of the Regional Housing Plan, and so we want to continue to have that relationship. Participate in trainings and conversations about other housing issues that are happening in the region. Promote foreclosure prevention programs administered by Valley CDC or HAP that do a lot of great work in our city, helping our city residents with not only first-time home buyer education, but also foreclosure prevention counseling. So finding ways to help support those agencies. Making sure the Council on Aging understands affordable housing resources and make sure that they can help educate their constituents on that. Educate municipal staff members and board members, many of whom are in the room, about affordable housing and accessible housing and on ways we can all work together. Again, this is something the Housing Partnerships talked a lot about, but developing an education piece that could be in the Gazette or in the Summit to kind of highlight different affordable housing issues going on. Write letters to the editor when we read things that aren't accurate or that we feel like we should respond to. Develop a program on affordable housing on the East Hampton Public Access Cable Channel. And increase public awareness by participating in local and state elections. In terms of asking questions at community forums and when we have local elections in the city. So those were our 23 high, did I say that? I maybe missed it. These were the high priorities. So I said there's 45, but these were the ones that we identified as our high priorities. And there may be others that people also think are high priorities that we can talk about. So I'm done. Thank you.
Sure. Before we jump into public comment, just what the next steps for us as the city. Once this plan is done, it's currently going like a preliminary review at DHCD right now to get some feedback to make sure that we've done everything that we're supposed to do. When the plan is finalized, which we expect to be done before Jean heads out on leave by the end of the month. And our contract is actually up at the end of the month, right? So by the end of the month. It needs to go to planning board for endorsement. It needs to go to city council, Joe, for endorsement. And we need to have a letter from the mayor. And those are 3 required pieces that need to be submitted with part of the plan. The plan then goes to DHCD for their review. If they find any issues, they would kick it back to us. If they approve it, then it is then officially certified. And I believe it's certified for, is it 5 years or 7 years?
It's approved. There's a difference between certified and approved, but
It's approved
it's approved for 5 years.
for 5 years.
And if you end up producing affordable housing units in that time frame, at 38 units a year, then it can be certified.
I see.
You can read all about that, but it's very
All about
specific language.
So that's what we're going to be moving on this summer. So hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have all of our endorsements by the appropriate boards, and we'll be sending it to DHCD. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll put this up there too.
Joe?
So I might have missed this since I was a little late coming in, but, so I got the impression from the letter that considering there is, before to be some questions about, some people like it, some people don't. It sounded like what was going to be presented today was another option, or not option, but something else you could do to maybe not have to reach the 10%.
Well, no, you still have to aim for the 10%, but what this plan would do is if it's approved and we produce the number of units that we would be required to produce, which is 38, in a year, we would get a certification designation that would, could be used in the appeals process, is my understanding, if we had an appeal with an affordable housing project. I'm trying to think of the simplest way to phrase sort of the teeth that it gives us. It really has to do with
It allows you to deny, allows your zoning board of appeals to potentially deny a 40B application for 1 year. For 1 year. And, yeah.
And is it, and on what basis? Is it because?
Because we have a plan in place that says that
Okay, that's
these are the
enough.
sort of things that we want. And if we have a project that maybe doesn't meet some of the goals that we've set out here, in other plans, I think the master plan as well can be used in some of that as well, maybe not. But, you know, we have information, we've gone through a process, and these are our goals, and so, you know, we have that team behind us for a year. If we produce 38 units in one year.
Is that literally 38 units per year, or is that, let's say, a 5-year period?
No.
And it
1
averages
year,
out?
38 units.
Could you explain how the 38 is calculated?
It's 0.5% of the total housing.
0.5% of East Hampton's total housing units?
So
We
as soon
need
as you build
757, right, total, and we have, what, 303 more to go before we hit 10%?
We're at 6,
But then it changes the number when you build more.
That's,
right?
yeah.
So
So
every
every
time
market-
you build more, it changes that.
Well, actually,
Jane's gonna clarify.
it's based on 2010 census data, so it will be 38 units until the 2020 census data comes out, which will probably be 2022. Sounds crazy to think about, but so that number is going to be static. What won't be static is if you increase affordable housing in your community, that percentage, like you're at 6% now, it could be 7% in 2 years when all those affordable housing units actually get created. So you're always going to be operating against this older housing unit number. I'm going to go back to the slide.
So
too,
let's
just so
say,
you can look at it.
a lot of luxury housing is built, and let's say 200 units of luxury housing is built, but you are
Then that changes that 6%.
obediently building your 38 of affordable, and your percentages are going down. Where does that put you? Your percentage, let's say you continue to build 38 units of
So
affordable housing a
it's
year, but your
almost-
percentages go down because some developer comes in and builds 1,000.
You've got two different things going on. You have the 38 units that allow us to have the plan being certified under the housing production plan, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
However, you've got the 200 luxury units that are happening, which now impacts the percentage,
Right,
that 10% number.
right.
So they're almost separate.
So it doesn't matter, as long as East Hampton is doing their 38 per year until the 20.
We still are shooting for 10%. I
But
mean,
you
that's
still-
really what,
Yeah.
that's still a goal. regardless of whether this plan is certified in a year or not, our goal is to hit 10%.
Just to hit 10%.
The 38 is also a goal for you know, if you want to set, I mean, I think one of the comments DHCD might come back with is that you didn't necessarily outline how you're going to hit 38 per year, which...
Yeah. Well, one of the questions is, when do you get to count them? When they're completed or when they're
I don't think, we had this discussion, I don't think your units count.
They're not counted yet.
Well, I don't think they'll count for this plan. I think because they're already permitted and you're in line, I don't think that they
And the
would.
same thing that holds for cottage. that
That's right.
they
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
count.
So it's almost like we kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So often what I tell communities is that are doing housing production plans, I mean, they want to do a housing plan to begin with. That's really the reason why they are doing the plan. And then the bonus is that if they do just a couple more things to meet DHCD's requirements of what they look for in a housing production plan, they could potentially get the benefits that Jessica had talked about earlier. And yeah, they may be difficult, sorry, here they are, to do, but it's a benefit of doing a housing production plan versus just doing a regular housing plan, is to have this potential relief from 40B, and then certainly preference for state grant funds. One was just announced the other day. It's called PATH, and they specifically said in there that they are going to give, they didn't use the word preference, but they're going to help communities that have approved housing production plans. And they don't mean communities that have housing plans, they mean housing production plans. So that's an example of how East Hampton would benefit with an approved housing production plan.
So Jessica, what you're, I don't know, I want to make sure I understand. So if we're reaching the 38 housing, what it allows you to do is, by having the plan, and the teeth you were talking about, is not have to accept a plan that you don't want, because you have the plan of what you do want. It gives you a little bit of a right of refusal.
right.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
What happens, Jess, if, let's say, 1 year you build 70 houses affordable, and the next year you only build 5? Well, since you've only built 5 that year, now do we have to accept a Chapter 40B that we might not like based on that 1 year?
My understanding is it's based on the previous year, but yes, it's only that coverage is only good for a year.
So that 38 is every year.
Every year.
To keep that protection. it's
Every year.
Yeah,
Every year.
that's-
And I think the challenge for us is we don't have, I mean, we're lucky that we had, 2 projects that are pretty substantial. We don't have a ton of land left to support stuff like that. I mean, we have 1 Fairview Street, which potentially could produce a lot of units, but there's not a ton of properties left in town that could produce that substantial number of units. So I think our days of big projects, I don't want to say that they're over, but they're not, I think it's, our challenge, I think, as a city, and this is the stuff that I'm seeing in the offices, I've got, like Jen said, I've got small local builders coming in saying, I'm kind of interested in building, a 6-unit building with a few affordable units. What do I have to do to do that? And when they hear that they have to have a fair, marketing plan, and there's all of these different things that they have to go through, then they just, no, not going to do it. So I think that we could slowly sort of chip away if there was a way that we could develop a system to work with our local builders that we see on a regular basis that own land in town, and have an inkling of interest and are willing to have a conversation about it if there was an easier path for them to go through in terms of financing and having help to build those units. And I think that's something that's a challenge for us. And I think it's something worth spending some effort on to try to figure out a way to make that work, because we have a lot of opportunity there. We don't have a lot of huge mill buildings still sitting around. Thankfully, we're blessed that we have people coming in and developing them. So, yes, Jim?
Doesn't having this plan in place and also give us some leverage when applying for funding for future projects? So, demonstrating that we're working toward achieving our goals, we have a better chance of getting the projects.
Just curious, what's the last 3 to 5 years, do you know what the average or what typically the number of affordable units how would be developed? Is 38 going to be like?
Well, all right, so I've been here for 2. I can't give you the 3 to 5.
Well, if we could just 15.
But I think we've been, again, we've been sort of in the sweet spot where we've had 38 units at Parsons and the 50 units at 15 Cottage. I mean, that's huge. That's huge.
That would be 2
And that's
units.
not gonna, that's probably not gonna happen again.
No, it doesn't come to
So now
it doesn't
that's
come to
going to
it.
take
Doesn't come to
away.
it. Yes.
Unless we have somebody come into One Ferry and wants to put a bunch of units in there, there's a capacity there. And like I said, there's some parcels, but there's not all that, you know, to have a capacity of that amount.
So if we accept it, we still may not reach 38, and hopefully we will, although we have some good years. So to be able to use this delay of a year may not be as practical as much as what Jim brought up. Maybe it will give us more access to funding. Is that probably the main?
That's probably, at this point for us, the main, but I think it's also, I'm a planner, I like plans, and I like having the path of where to go next. I like having priorities set. I like having it written down so that the partnership, we know this stuff now, and we can move forward, and when opportunities come forth, we've thought about it, and we know when to take advantage of things, when the iron is hot, when do we move forward on stuff. Sometimes we're being approached by developers. And so if we have a plan, then we can have that conversation with them. And I think it's just useful to go through this process to have a place to go from, in my opinion.
And the reason that 15 Cottage is because, what you said, it's already permanent. I mean, even though it's the same year as the plan, because it's already hit the permitting process, I mean, they're not there, they're not.
Yeah, I mean, they're in construction.
So that's, it doesn't go by
Valley's about to
years.
start construction shortly here.
But we're not, so, but it depends, I guess, when you plan, but it's first on being permanent.
Right.
Yeah, so I can answer that.
So,
Can I just add 2 things? I think the other really good thing about having a housing production plan is it gives us a tool to help educate people, right? And it helps to bring attention to an issue and to bring attention to it. And then maybe it goes without saying, because most of us in the room know this already, but the reason we care so much about building affordable housing is because the market just doesn't really build it. I mean, you have to, it's very difficult, it costs the same amount to build a unit that you can sell to someone who has a lot of money as it does to sell or rent to someone who doesn't. So if you know you have to sell it for less, you're not going to make money on it if you're, typical developer. So it just requires a different skill set and a lot more time and attention to build affordable housing. And most people, as Jess is saying, aren't really willing or able to do that. So that's the other reason to have a housing production plan, and just to even have the conversation and have a housing partnership to begin with. So, and maybe that is obvious to people in this room, but I think it's not necessarily obvious to everyone else who's not here.
Right, and it's not always welcome either.
It's challenging, for sure, it's challenging.
You
Yeah.
talk about the profit, but you also have neighborhoods that are not always welcoming to the lot of it.
So my plan is to at least take this presentation, sort of follow up and put it on the website, put a link to it through our Facebook page so that people can have
And we
access
can
to
use
it.
it with ECAT to develop it into a program as
Yep,
well.
and ECAT's taping tonight, so this will be run on ECAT.
Kind of a general question. Why do you think the state is not interested in looking at market rate housing that is affordable? I'm sorry if I'm dominating, but for instance, there are plenty of inexpensive apartments in East Hampton.
But there's a whole process that you need to go through.
They don't count on the
They don't-
subsidized
why?
housing inventory because you have to use the fair marketing plan to get people. to
No, I
approve
know,
it.
but I mean philosophically, why?
Because they're not deed restricted, I think. So because
Right.
there's no guarantee that that unit
That they're
is
gonna
going
rent it
to
to someone
stay
who's-
affordable. It might be affordable now,
Right.
but it's not going to be, it may not be affordable in 5 years.
And you're also not certifying
You're not
who's
sure
renting it.
who's
So there could
renting
be
it, could
someone
be-
who's over the 80% who's renting it, so then it doesn't count, right?
Someone's got to monitor who's in the apartment and the area
Renting
eligible.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
It just does seem ironic that East Hampton is known as a place where you can get an inexpensive apartment if you're a person with moderate means, but that's not acknowledged or recognized by the bean counters of the state. It's just
Part of this is
interesting.
maintaining that as well.
What's that?
Well, part of this is maintaining that. to keep up the perception, we have to maintain having that availability. To do that, we have to work.
I have a question about that. The slide that listed the number of bedrooms and the current rents. I've been looking for new living space for the last 6 weeks, and it looked like those numbers were off by like an order of magnitude.
Oh, really?
Too low?
Very low.
Yeah.
One bedroom I think was $575, and I've been seeing one bedrooms going as high as
$850.
yeah.
But you did say that that's behind when those reports are.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking now,
Right, they were done in 10.
So those are
I think it's from
4
2012.
years old.
The rents were.
the rents are from 2012, yeah.
And then when
Two years
Christine, like Christine stated.
Yeah, mostly.
Right.
Is that including utilities or just?
No, that's rent plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing 2 bedrooms going for over $1,000.
Yeah.
Plus.
Which is, good. I just did this for the Amherst Pelham area, and that's consistent with what you're seeing up there, so. So you're part of almost the Northampton market, I mean, as you know, so that would definitely be true, I guess.
Right. There was an NPR piece on a couple of afternoons ago about LA, about 5 people living in a 1-bedroom, and the cost is $1,000 plus, and even with 2+ people, adults working, they can't afford it. So they have to go to the community pantry for food. They can't get that over. And there's a trickle-down effect that's also affecting East Hampton. Just looking at the rents going up and up and up and up as the demand goes up, as the appeal of East Hampton goes up, and there's more demand than there is supply, and the landlords keep bumping the rent. So it's very, very hard if you're in a lower needs category to find anything, because then that's being tested. You have to fill out an application where you have to submit your proof of income, your 1040s. If you don't meet a certain standard and you're not in a low income category, you're bumped. No explanation. Don't know.
Good job.
Joanne, did you have a question?
I was going to ask if the partnership had inventory property around town as part sort of either city-owned or just identifying parcels that potentially could be development.
We have, I think we're required to do those.
Yeah. We have that. It's part of the plan, so it'll be available tomorrow on the website. Yeah.
I think it's too bad about low-income housing, because I think the people that live in the area where it's going to be built get the wrong impression. Because when you say it's affordable, or it takes a lot of money to get into these places. It is, and they're more likely that people are moving in there at better jobs than people that are complaining that they're moving into their own neighborhoods. You got to make 45 or 60 grand a year to get into something. That's more money than a lot of people are making that live in this area that they're complaining about. And so public knowledge of what actually affordable housing really is, it's unfortunate that they really don't know. And they think it's some kind of a threat. Because as soon as they say affordable housing, they figure they're going to have all kinds of problems. And that's not the case in a lot of cases. So public, being educated as to what's actually going on and who's moving in there would really help.
Any other comments, questions?
You've had a lot of challenges on the projects that have been happening, and looking at different things and reuses of buildings. I mean, look at the Parsons Street School, the Parsons Street project. So it's also a challenge on the other end too. So, it's a definite need, but at the same point in time, it isn't easy to.
Not easy to spend.
I have one more question. So you mentioned one of the blockages for people who want to develop is that some regulations. Is that something we alter on our level, or is that something we need to change?
I think it's a bigger state level. There's certain requirements that have to be done.
For affordable housing.
For affordable housing, right. And they need to happen. I mean, you need to market the unit appropriately. You need to make sure that you income qualify people. You need to make sure that they stay income qualified. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And then plus the cost that Jackie was referring to, and so it costs the same, so is there a subsidy? Do they want to apply for some level of subsidy? Is that money even available to those small projects, or are they only available? I mean, that money is very competitive. Joanne can probably speak to it better than I can in terms of how competitive it is, but they're really for bigger projects, and I don't know if somebody who wants to just build 2 units, if they
And they would, I mean, there's a minimum number of units, they wouldn't have the experience, the state
Right.
wouldn't even look at them.
Right.
But whether someone could do something with CPA money where you would have control. You know,
I just hear CPA money.
but you still need someone who's going to monitor it, so what does the city have to monitor
Right.
smaller units? Well, the housing authority, the
Right.
retired, the housing authority would take on the role of
monitoring
and income qualifying.
And we've had some of these conversations in terms of, with HAP anyway, about, you know, if they don't have the capacity to monitor, could they train us to do it? What does it take? What's the process? You know, is that a capacity that we can take on? You know, so it's.
I know who has the capacity.
Spare time.
But those are questions that have definitely come up as part of this process. Yeah. So.
And I mean, I think, you know, for me, I see it, if we could figure out a way to have like a pilot program where we could find a consultant to help that one developer of that 6-unit building, you know, deal with DHCD, get the regulatory agreement figured out, figure out who's going to do their marketing plan, you know, kind of provide that support so it's not so scary. And then, you know, then maybe that could be a program that the city offers. Like, yeah, we've got some money from somewhere, and we can help you with that process.
Some undisclosed source that we have.
So that it's not so scary, so that they don't come into Jessica's office and say, what, I have to do this, and I have this, you know, 75-page booklet on how to do a marketing plan that I have to read, that I don't know how to do. I mean, I think but there's people out there that this is what they do for a living.
Right.
Like, they're consultants, and so how do we kind of fit that together?
And we have local builders that want to do the right thing, and they want, you know, they ask, you know, I want to be able to do this. And when we start to explain this is the process, they go, yeah, no, forget it. So.
And would their profit margin also be less?
Well, probably.
Yeah, so.
I mean, but a lot can balance it out by doing some, you know, if you have a 6-unit building, you have 4 market units and 2 affordable. And that helps to balance that out.
Well, it helps you to get your typical project, your typical profit on the ones that are not affordable, but, you know, basically, it's a very cumbersome process.
Well, and you have to know how to make sure it's going to work. And again, that's where there are professionals who do pro formas and help developers do that. And, you know, that's not what the housing partnership does, but I mean, I think that so I think that it'd be cool to figure out a way to kind of fit those pieces together and see if that kind of thing might work once, or maybe we could replicate it.
I don't know if anyone's ever used it. We did change the zoning that if anyone develops 25% affordable housing, they get a density bonus to supposedly help offset that cost so they can sell more units to compensate for some of it.
You mean the multifamily? You're talking about multifamily?
No, it used to be, remember, it started off being a density bonus for
For the seniors.
55 and over, and we
Right,
changed it
yes.
so if anyone in
So it's
any district
multifamily,
wanted to
yeah.
do that.
Yep.
But I thought it was just a density bonus for.
There is, so we have multifamily zoning, then we have multifamily zoning with affordable housing, and that has density bonus information, in it. So yes, we do have that zoning. But still, even with that, I think there's issues in the zoning because of how multifamily is defined, and multifamily under that definition, even with the 15% affordable housing, really addresses a complex of buildings rather than 6 units. So right now, a 6-unit would have to have open space requirements, they'd have to have all of this crazy stuff, because our definition for multifamily is just 3 units or above. We don't have a separate definition for complexes of buildings. So there's definitely zoning things that need to be even fixed to make some of this stuff work. Yeah. Anything else? 10 past 8? Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jane.
You, fun town city.